Today, in our session 4 of the Roundtable with Accession Chief Negotiators, we will be trying to inform those who would like to listen to us what are the main prerequisites to have a successful accession. What is the role of planning at a high governmental level, the accession process? What is the role of discussing the issues of accession with all the interested stakeholders in the country? How we could then organize our presentations in the WTO through our negotiating teams, and of course, develop networking and contacts with the member states so that we present our cases, our goals and expectations, and are able to have an active role in the process of accession. Of course, in all this, it will be important, the role of the Secretariat, but this will be covered by other sessions. We will be speaking rather as far as our relations with the other member states are concerned, and about what we were doing at home to prepare well for the accession. Today we'll be discussing 3 accession processes, that of Afghanistan, of Bulgaria, and also the most recent one that is now in the pipeline. This is the accession of Curaçao, which are 3, in fact, different cases. Bulgaria was acceding to the WTO after it became a market economy on the basis of an experience, however, of a centralized planned economy. Afghanistan is a developing country, and especially a least developed country. And Curaçao has a very interesting experience by trying to join as an independent actor in the WTO, not under the umbrella of the Kingdom of Netherlands as before. So these are 3 different approaches, 3 different expectations. I'll start by saying that for Bulgaria, it was very important to have an accession based on equal terms. And that's what we tried to achieve in our negotiations. They lasted very long. We started in '68 and we finished, in fact, in 1996 when we signed the accession protocol. We started as a centrally planned economic country, but one that developed an efficient customs tariff, and we negotiated on the basis of a customs tariff, not on the basis of quantitative obligations, and as some other Eastern European countries. We believe that we could, even in the context of that economy, create an environment which would make the operators, the economic operators, take independent decisions depending on their commercial considerations. And we were able to prove that in the long process of negotiations. For example, because we were thinking already about joining the EU in the last steps of the negotiations, we never accepted to whatever quantitative obligations related to agriculture and obligations to subsidies as some other countries accepted. So we entered the WTO without commitments not to subsidize agriculture and our exports at that time, which is really an achievement, which afterwards helped us when we joined the EU to negotiate the so-called compensation for the accession of Bulgaria to the EU. So we were really planning long-term, and our second, of course, consideration at that time was that as a small country, we could rely on the dispute settlement in the WTO because Bulgaria is and was an open economic country at that time. More than 50% of our GDP was exported, and we relied on equal treatment and that's what we wanted to achieve through the WTO. And another very important consideration in our case, as we were transforming our economy from a centrally planned to a market economy, was that through the WTO and through the then GATT rules, we could learn a lot how to develop our legislation so as to create equal conditions for all market operators, so as to promote efficiency and to promote the possibility of market-oriented decisions, and which at the end would affect our economy in a positive way. So these were some of the considerations we had. In the process, of course, we relied very much on a good negotiating team, on the governmental support at highest levels in Bulgaria in all this period of time. And we had formulated a negotiating strategy for all these years with very important red lines that we could not in no case pass. So I think that was the basis of our approach to negotiations. We became, in fact, the second acceding country after the GATT became WTO, and I think that our experience over the years as a separate country and also as a member of the European Union has been positive. But with this introduction about Bulgaria, I would very much like to give the floor to Mozamil to tell us what about Afghanistan, which had much greater challenges that we had, though the problems of transformation, of change, are problems that Afghanistan also had to face. Please, Mozamil.
Thank you, Atanas. It's a pleasure to be part of such great members. And I would like to thank the World Trade Organization, especially the Accession Division, for inviting me to this program and to share my experience in the process that we been through. As you know, Afghanistan is a country still facing problem, and we are facing around 40 years of conflict, war, civil war, everything, brutality, everything was there. And something that we look to it after post-Taliban, era, and especially when we are talking about 2001 and onwards, we started everything from scratch, even sometime below the scratch, because there were no institutions, nothing were going on, and we started building our relationship with other countries. Trade always, Afghanistan had that privilege because it was, always there as a bridge between Central Asia and South Asia. When we talk about the old Silk Road or the Silk Road, it passes through Afghanistan. So traditionally, we were a country with a trade, and trade was always there. So that's why it gave us that privilege and that advantage. But at the same time, we were a landlocked country, and that was a biggest headache for us, especially having neighbors that we were always having problem with them in terms of the transit trade. So that was a big issue. So when the government decided that let's move ahead with the work that we become the partner, global partner, and partner to the international community. So there are several reasons that we wanted to move ahead with the WTO process. The first one, of course, was the major one, which was the securing the transit right. And we wanted that because we were facing problem. Pakistan is the founding member of the WTO, which is already there, and Iran is not yet there. Uzbekistan is not yet there. So we wanted at least to have, sorted out problem with Pakistan, but at the same time to be in the organization before the other neighboring countries like Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Iran, to be in a better position to dictate, in terms of the transit work. Second issue was, of course, our regional membership. We were already member of the SAFTA, South Asian Free Trade Area agreement, and then ECOTA, Economic Cooperation Organization Trade Agreement, where 90% or 80 to 90% of our trade was already, committed to it. So because our major trading partners are either member of the Economic Cooperation Organization, which include Turkey, Iran, and Central Asian Republic, including Pakistan, and South Asian, which include India, Pakistan, and other South Asian countries. So we said our trade is already committed for it. So why not to take the advantage in order to attract the foreign direct investment? And that was the third reason that we wanted to move ahead with that, to attract the foreign FDI, because we have raw material available inside Afghanistan, cheap labor, access to international market, and at the same time, all the resources available. So we said, if we become member of World Trade Organization by adopting or making those laws, which is the fourth point, that around 30 pieces of legislation that to the private sector development and intellectual property right and all those things. So if we have all those things, so we will be able to develop Afghanistan economically and also socially, because the people will benefit for that from it. At the same time, that will have an impact on the social living and also the conflict resolution. And what I always worked for it was the peace through the economic development, because if you give opportunities of work to the people, if you create jobs for them, so they will directly or indirectly will be diverted from the insurgencies and all those things. So that was the reason we processed. Technical work, I will just share my experience with the attendees and colleagues that just on the how we manage pre-accession negotiation and during the negotiation. What we did, the first thing, we did our homework. We said what we need to move ahead with that. Second thing was always there that we wanted to build a strong team. It's not like the developing world or the developed world that you have every person in charge of everything. As a chief negotiator, you have that duty, and you will be at the end of the day responsible, whether for a good deal or bad deal. Nobody else will be just put responsible, because they said it was you who was leading this thing. So that's why my job became quite difficult, that I had to find out the strong intellectual and relevant ministries, especially the technical ministries, whether we talk about trade and goods, like agriculture goods and all those things, whether we talk about the services, like we wanted someone from the central bank, Ministry of Finance, telecommunication, transportation, name it. So we had to find the people, and there were a challenge in that, because the people most of the time I wanted, those were the people not identified by the relevant ministers. And even those people I wanted to be part of the negotiation team, they were not the people that ministers would prefer to be in the negotiation team. Because normally when we talk about the negotiation, it's a tough process. But most of the people would be looking to that, oh, it has travels to Geneva, it has, luxury on that and all those things. So that is, I'm talking about the ground realities of a least developed countries, that we are, you find out those things as a kind of luxury thing to be part of it. So that was the first challenge. Second challenge was that as we were new to the systems and we were working on that, how to build their capacity, their technical capacity, their negotiation capacity, and also they should understand what they are going to do. And for that, we managed to select a country which was somehow in a similar situation with us for a study tour. We spent 1 week or 10 days with them to educate those people how they manage to get those things. The third thing was that taking them all to Geneva and just making them listen to the other countries' working party, that how they're working on it, how they're answering the question, what information we should give, what information we should not give. And the most difficult thing was for the chief negotiator, because at the end of the day, you were responsible. So I had to work on my, things. I have to be prepared for everything in each and every sector. If the relevant person, somehow mishandle those things, how I can fix it, how I can move ahead with that. So that was quite challenging work. So during the negotiation, when we started negotiation, initially there were some hectic or some problems in the start of our negotiation before our first working party meeting, because all members thought that Afghanistan is not willing to come, but international community is forcing them to come. And that somehow create a kind of misunderstanding in some of the in the mind of some of the member country, and that was a big issue. And we wanted to prove that no, we are willing, but the process was, you know, delayed because of the either the problem with the political problem, the change of the government back in 2009, 2010, and all those things. But at the end of the day, what we managed to do that, we wanted to send a strong political signal. So we asked our minister, we asked all the members to be present there. So in the negotiation, the important thing is that first thing from my experience, you should not inflate your bound rates, especially while talking about the market access for goods. You should be realistic on that. For the, you know, every country, you should look at that, what you need and what that put you in a good position to negotiate. Second thing, you should be frank, you should be straightforward, you should explain your situation to the member country, because what I noticed that if you convince the member, that is the important thing. You should do your political work as well, not only focusing on your negotiation team, but back in your capital, you should talk to the relevant member country, you should seek their support and all those things. Third thing, you know, Cecilia is here. She was a tough negotiator, but also a good, for me especially, a good mentor or a good teacher. I learned a lot from her. You know, once she told me, look, Muzammil, there is, you know, things are done between the meetings, not in the meetings. So, you know, between the meetings, it is somehow quite important. You have to look at those things, and you can work on those areas. You should develop your relationship with the other members in Geneva, because that is quite important. The most important thing is that you should get the advantage of the capacity building programs that is offered by the WTO. That is quite important. You know, I myself, before starting the negotiation, I took several programs and I was part of those programs. So at least to learn basic things, because for the countries, it's those they're negotiating, it's completely new thing. You don't know anything on that. You can't 100% rely on the technical support you are getting, which is quite important, especially for the least developed countries. You should get the technical support from the international community, but you can't rely on them, because at the end of the day, you are the person who's making decision and who is working for the country. They're giving you technical support, but you decide which one is good, which one is not good. So that's why at least the minimum level of education about the WTO should be there for a chief negotiator, but at the same time, all the negotiating partners. That is quite important. The negotiators, they should know their technical work, which is quite important, because if one person is speaking for everything, that will create a kind of negative image in the members. They said, okay, this is the one person, what about the other people are sitting there? So that's why it is quite important that each and every person in the negotiation team should be on top of his or her work. The other thing, like this was the negotiation process that we went through. We were quite good in that we said, okay, we were realistic, because for us already our bound rates for agriculture and non-agriculture goods, it was below 10%, and we managed to get around 33 in agriculture and more than around 20 in non-agriculture. So that helped us a lot. So that's why we followed the LDC guidelines, even it didn't help that much as we were expecting, but that was something that you can look at it. The most important thing that you can work on it is your relationship with the accession division of WTO. That is quite important. You know, you should communicate with them, because they can be a source of information, source of knowledge sharing for you, and source of, you know, all kind of, you know, problem that you are potentially facing in the process. So it will make you aware in the process. That is quite important. Now, my personal experience in some of the areas that where I can put also a suggestion for WTO first, for the WTO member, like we face this COVID and Corona work. And that affected the economy quite badly all around the world, especially developing world and especially LDCs. So one suggestion I can put that if any country comes within the limit of the LDC guidelines approved by the WTO members, my suggestion would be that there shouldn't be any market access negotiation with them. The WTO members should focus on the rule side, laws, relevant legal document, but in the market access negotiation, because for them, market access is not that much a bigger thing that they can use it overall for the economic development. They're using it for the overall social responsibility of that country, because with the production of certain things, with agriculture goods and all those things, they're creating jobs, they are making people live with it. So all those things, especially for the LDCs, my recommendation would be that. Second thing, for the countries that they're negotiating right now, it's up to you. Come with whatever you want to say, but try to convince the member country. I remember, I had quite tough argument with the former director of Accession, Mr. Shidu. We miss him a lot. May his soul rest in peace. We were always arguing about the standard commitment. Standard commitment, yes, they're putting that, most of the countries that they have taken that commitment. But if you think that you can convince members, if you think that you can defend your position, even which is a standard commitment, but you don't want to take it, go and convince the members and ask them. If the members are convinced, they're the people that they're making decision at the end of the day. So those are the things that I faced, in the WTO accession negotiation. Now, the final thing I want to conclude with that, it's about the post-accession work. From the experience of the LDCs, one of the biggest problem in the, after accession, which is, with the most of the LDCs I have seen, including Afghanistan, the negotiation team that you are having, somehow because of the political change, because of the government change and all those things, they're just getting sidelined. And whatever you are expecting to achieve from those accessions, somehow it is delayed or slowed down, or somehow it is, differ for a while. So this is the biggest challenge. And for the LDCs, they should look at that, because either these people, they are getting quite good position outside the government, or the political changes in the government force them to be aside or to stay away from the government or kicked out. So this is the issue. So the people, they are coming after the negotiation, somehow they think that, oh, maybe those people, what they negotiated, how they negotiated and all those things, they don't know the exact thing that they have done. So the post-accession work mostly affected negatively by those changes. So this is the biggest headache with the LDCs, and this is the biggest challenge. So I'll be available for any question or from the attendees or any comment. That I would like to conclude on this, and would like to hear from other members as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Muzamil. Thank you for your good advice to those who listen to us, and especially what you mentioned, that despite the negotiations are very complex, one should keep his integrity and be frank in the process. So that is the way to establish a reliable relationship with the other member states and with the Secretariat. Thank you once again for your presentation. I see that you have managed to keep your deserved place after the negotiations. So I hope most of the people that negotiated will follow your experience and your destiny, so to say. But now let me ask Karel what he would like to tell us and share with our participants in the process that he's now experiencing. Please, Karel.
Well, good morning, all of you. Good morning, Atanas. Good morning, Cecilia. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you again. We are so happy to be part of this gathering. Curaçao is actually the youngest member among the observers that is trying to make it as an independent member of the WTO, partly thanks to Cecilia too. And I remember that we went to the United States in 2014 to talk to her about our Article 28 consultations, and we were met gracefully by Cecilia and a very large team of several agencies of the US, which is our main trading partner. And she kindly suggested to us to take the road of the Article 12 instead of negotiating an Article 28 renewal of the schedule. So here we are. We have followed your advice. We have convinced everybody back home, including our political leaders right away back in 2014. But it took a while for us to implement the process as it should be implemented due to many internal reasons. But thank you very much, Cecilia. We are here, and we hope that one day we can use your vast experience to advance us in this process. I always want to thank Mozamil, because lots of the things that he said is actually playing now, because we are at the beginning of the process. So much of what he has gone through and the experiences that he has told us about during this session are very welcome, and I take them, and I really, really take them to heart, because we are already seeing bits and pieces of what is to come. And what Mozamil has said is clearly an indication of how we have to prepare for the whole process. We have a very distinct, very unique accession. We have only been accepted as an observer on March the 7th last, but we are a very unique part of the accession process that the WTO has known up to now. Our previous country was the Netherlands Antilles, which has a huge experience in international trade members, and as we could recall, was since 1949, I think it was NSC part of the GATT, and we continued being part of the GATT under the umbrella of the Kingdom of the Netherlands until the GATT ceased to exist, and we became part of the WTO in 1995, but still as part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Well, we are still part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. In October 2010, about 10 years ago, 9.5 years ago, we converted our status of being the Netherlands Antilles as a country consisting of 5 islands within the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Curaçao as one autonomous country within the Kingdom of the Netherlands. As such, because we have a separate customs territory, separate from the Netherlands, separate from the European Union, we have decided many years ago, since actually 1998, to become an independent or a separate member of the WTO. It took us a long while because obviously a lot of things have changed along the way, but we maintained course. We maintained our vision of anchoring ourselves, because we are in the Caribbean area, more in the region where we are, and advancing our international trade agenda within the region. As such, we have been advocated for a number of years, actually many years, that we want to have separate bilateral trade agreements with countries within the region. As a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, we have already started negotiating these trade agreements with several of these countries, among which Colombia, which is a country which is much bigger than we are. There's about 50 million inhabitants, and the Dominican Republic, which has about 10, 11 million inhabitants. But this small island of us, we don't have a large local market, and it can therefore only expand its economic base through the conclusion of these bilateral trade agreements and the increase of our exports and products of products and services to mainly regional countries, because we insist that most of our economic gain will come from investment and exports, and we will have to start deepening regional integration and deepening our integration in the region first before we go out and try to export to countries in the European Union or wherever. So our vision for the independent WTO membership is based on the need to expand our exports. And we have given this vision a name, Curaçao Export Nation, for which we need the bilateral trade agreements I was just talking about with countries within the region that are based on WTO rules and regulations. So the moment we start discussing possible bilateral trade agreements, everybody will ask us, are you part of the European Union? Are you part of the WTO? Yes, we are part of the WTO, but not part of the European Union. And our part of the WTO is that we have a shared membership with the kingdom. And a lot of countries with which we speak, actually, they are developing countries, and they want to use the enabling clause to be able to conclude these arrangements with us. So anyway, by being part of a shared membership within the Kingdom of the Netherlands, which focuses primarily on the European Union, we had to make a definite choice to become an independent member in our own right. So now that we are or have been accepted as observing member, as observer within the WTO, obviously we will have to start negotiations on our own, separate from the Netherlands, separate from the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So we are in the process of preparing for the negotiations. As I said, we only started last March. We have to prepare ourselves for all the negotiations that will have to take place within the Accession Working Party. First of all, we have to increase the quality of our organization and building more capacity through training and recruitment of especially young people. And we are making arrangements for that, and also will use the arrangements that are in place for observer countries. But it is very essential, as Mozamil said before, that you have a good organization, that you have well-trained people that can take portions of the agreements and, as it were, defend them in terms of our rights and obligations within the WTO. So we are focusing very much right at this moment at building capacity, building an organization that can really negotiate our accession as an independent member of the WTO. And in that process, we are right in the middle of that process, trying to get younger people in who either have the expertise or will develop the expertise over time to be able for us to have the fruitful negotiations with the members. The second issue I would want to mention is that the development of the memorandum of the foreign trade regime, actually, if you look at what we have submitted at the request for membership, there's already like a quarter of the memorandum in there, because we have taken example memorandums to provide the necessary information in getting into the door. And now we are working with several ministries and institutions of the government to capture all the necessary information to be able to make the final memorandum of foreign trade regime. In that process, what we have encountered at the moment is that you will see the total dimension of the several economic policies that the country has like never before, because now you have to defend them whether they are in compliance with WTO rules and regulations. So you have to take a deeper look into your economic policy and be able to defend them and note where exceptions will have to be notified to the WTO committees. So we are operating in a policy review space right now, and we are at the start of that process, but you can already see that we will encounter many things that normally you will take for granted and not question them. And now is the time to really review them and go through them. And as we go through them, it is also a fantastic way for our younger people to advance in the various themes that we are encountering in relation to the WTO agreements. In terms of acceptability, we have, of course, encountered some cries of businesses that would ask of whether or not we should do this and whether it's in our interest to do it. My view and the view of the team is actually that we are already part of the WTO as part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So we should be complying to the rules and regulations anyway. Secondly, we have an ambition to conquer more markets. In our calculation, even if we take less than 1% of the surrounding market, we will have a market that is double than the market that we currently have, which is in the benefit of our country. So we are looking at the road ahead also in terms of giving more explanation, more communication with private sector entities to get them on board of this project. As a matter of fact, many years ago, the government of the Netherlands Antilles already abolished industry protection, and we will continue on the route to be in compliance with WTO rules and regulations to be able to be an integral member of the WTO family. We still, at this moment, are, of course, the youngest child in the family, and because we need to do more work to become an adult, we are still in the process of finding our way, because we still have not gotten to the phase where we are actually negotiating. But the beauty of the process is that we get to speak to a lot of experienced people and experienced chief negotiators who are all willing to provide us with their experiences, their knowledge, in order for us to advance our agenda as Curaçao. I will leave it to that, and for the moment, if there are any questions, I would be happy to get into them. Thank you, Atanas, and thank you, my fellow panelists.
Thank you, Karim. Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation of the way you are building a strategy to start the negotiations, a long-term strategy with all the necessary steps to be efficient in the negotiations, to be well prepared, and to be very well argumented. So thank you for this statement. And I will turn now to Cecilia, who knows all of us, I understand, and whom I am very glad to see here because she has been a major partner in my efforts when Bulgaria was joining the GATT at that time. But what is important today is, of course, to hear her comments on what we all have just said and to share her impression of those countries that negotiated the accession and what was most important for them to succeed. She obviously has a view on this after so many years having experience not only presenting the US interests in the negotiations, but also trying to preserve the GATT and then WTO integrity when new members join. Please, Cecilia. You should unmute yourself.
Yes, I have.
Thank you.
So, can everyone see me?
Yes.
Excellent.
We see you and you hear you well.
Excellent. I'm very pleased to be part of this process for the simple reason that of all the international organizations that countries belong to, the WTO is the one that I think is most important in terms of developing a country's ability to project its needs and its abilities to offer. The important thing about the accession process is that it is the very best training ground for being a member. You put in an enormous amount of effort in getting your team together, in pulling your documentation together, and it takes forever. This process is not slow. So it will take a good deal of time for a country, a customs territory, as Carl well knows, to pull all of this together. You'll need a team that can operate independently of your guidance when you as negotiator are not there. Someone to manage the rules process of working with your legislature and with other people who have interest in the process. You'll need specialists on things like sanitary and phytosanitary issues, technical barriers to trade, especially customs, and these days intellectual property. You'll need people who can organize and develop your position on goods, services, and agriculture. Goods in particular, because tariffs, well, everybody understands numbers, yes? Services, because that is the future of international trade. And agriculture, because agriculture is almost always the foundation stone of interests within a country. You need to be able to call on these people to be your connection with the private sector and with other interested parties. When you're pulling together your documentation, you have to assume that the people you're negotiating with want everything you've got. They want to know everything. They want to know how it works. They want to know whether or not your laws embody the structure of the WTO. The Secretariat's plan for the Foreign Trade Memorandum is probably your best guide. Be as complete as possible when you're putting this together. If you provide too little information, you'll just have to go back and provide it again in the Q's and A's. Please tell me if I'm not right, Mr. Paparisov, because if you don't provide the information up front, they come after you for it.
You're quite right.
The questions and replies are terribly important. They are, in a way, the circle of life of the negotiation on rules. Without this ongoing dialogue, there really can be no multilateral negotiating process. Members' questions and comments are the best indication that an applicant has of what members are truly interested in your trade regime. I know that there's an enormous amount of focus on, well, should I cut tariffs? Or what services industries can I open up? And that's not unimportant. I mean, that's huge. But the foundation stone of an accession is the discussion about rules. And they need to understand the information that you provide. Your replies to their questions are truly, I would say, the best message you can send to the participating members, that you understand their issues and that that you are willing to work with them. So the quality of the replies to the questions is really quite important. I have to say that both Atanas and Carol have said a number of terribly important things. First of all, the importance of building a team. Secondly, to become familiar with the Geneva scene and to work the members, and to use each opportunity, each time you're in Geneva, to make friends and to ensure that your major trading partners are part of the equation. You think accession is hard, but I'll tell you, membership is harder. And your accession process is your absolute best way to prepare for that. I would say that in the negotiating process, never complain about there being too many questions. Be complete but selective in your responses. Give a certain amount of time for the questions to come in and then cut it off. Have a plan for identifying and distributing the questions when they come in. Keep tabs on where they're going. Be sure that your team is operating properly. If legislation is worth mentioning in a response, you should be prepared to provide it and to discuss it. I would say that the most important aspect of the process is you as applicant demonstrating to the other members your readiness to be part of the process. I'd like to develop this more in a question and answer sense.
Okay, thank you very much for this insight that you gave us, Cecilia. And we, of course, would be interested for the questions and answers that we'll now start to develop. First of all, I'll propose, though we have two questions, to invite you, the panelists, to ask questions to each other and to Cecilia. Please, who'd like to start? Okay, I see Karel, please. Please, you have the floor.
Atanas, I said me, I'm the youngest, so.
Okay, please.
Now, I would like to ask Mozamil a question, but also to Cecilia. My question to Mozamil is, what was the most difficult thing you experienced during these negotiations, and how did you solve it? So I want you to frame it in terms of not only negotiations, but the panorama that was there, and when you got there, and what subsequently, you don't have to mention names exactly, but give us a flavor of that environment and how Afghanistan has went through it. And to Cecilia, I wanted to ask, because of her vast experience, and all of us know her in some way or another, and have been in touch with her throughout the years. Given your experience, your vast experience, and now you're retired from the USTR, but you're still in the field, as it were, every day, engaging with countries, with chief negotiators and ministries and ministers. What are some of the best practices that you have seen in the various accessions that facilitate a smoother accession process? I mean, you already told us some about the organization, but could you, for our audience, could you list like 5 of the things that you really need to take care of to be, as it were, on the ball in going through the process? I mean, every process has its ups and downs, but there are certain things that if you keep at them, you will certainly pass through the process. Thank you so much in advance.
Thank you very much. So we have these 2 questions: the greatest difficulties and the best practices to overcome them. Probably Mozamil will start and Cecilia will continue. Please, Mozamil.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I will mention three of them. First, it's building your team. That is the most difficult one, because in countries like us, which is also normal in other countries as well, as I mentioned in my presentation, but because most of the ministers, they want their favorite to be part of the team, but you as a chief negotiator, you want the best in your team. That is always a conflicting issue. And, you know, I would face sometime in the cabinet meeting, a minister would come to me and he said, how dare you selecting a person in my ministry? You know, I wanted this person, but you are doing this thing. So that was always a challenge in the process. But the good thing was that we got the overall political support from the government to move ahead with the process. So that helped us. Second thing was, as a chief negotiator, normally all the responsibility would come on you. So you have to handle in a way your internal technical work as well as the political pressure coming from the government side and as well as the private sector. So these 3 were always, you know, a biggest challenge, how to bring them, you know, all together. Like, for example, when we were discussing the market access, especially submitting our offer on goods, that was a quite challenging work. So I sat with my minister at that time and I told him, look, how we can you know, move ahead with this thing. He said, this is a big challenge and we might face big, you know, resistance from everyone, including parliament and everything, because you are limiting, you know, the tariff rate and all those things, and that will become a biggest issue. So he said, let's do it in a 2 or 3 ways. The first way, he said, from the government side, let's take it to the economic committee of the cabinet. So we can discuss it there and we can get in principle agreement on that. And we can tell them that it is not final, but at least we want your permission to send it. So, you know, they will be informed. Second thing, that they will understand that. But before going there, what we did, we asked the private sector, both the producers and the importers. We prioritize our all sectors that which matter a lot to us. So that's why we bring, for example, if we are talking about soft drink side, so we would bring the producer inside Afghanistan and also the importer. We would ask them, sit in the room, decide on something you both should decide, and give me a signed paper that you both agreed on that, so it will make my job easy. So once I would get that, I would just put my negotiation gap to, kind of like we can say that if they were giving me 50%, so I would put 80%. So 30% a kind of negotiation area for me, so I can move through and accept that. And based on that, we finalized. The third was the parliament, which was the most difficult, because at the end of the day, you have to get the approval from the parliament for your negotiation, the overall accession package. So for that, I started interacting with the three committees in the Parliament: Foreign Relations Committee, Economic Committee, and Budget and Finance Committee. So what I would do, I would give them a kind of a good travel to Geneva to witness the negotiation. They would sit in the negotiation table. They would like that because they were given an importance in all those things, but they will be also included in decision making. So at the end of the day, you tell them that, okay, you head of the Economic Committee, Foreign Relations Committee and all, you were part of the negotiation, how we managed to do, how we defended the interests of those things. So like these things helped me a lot in the process. Like when we were getting approval of the parliament, and especially the laws to be approved of the parliament, and especially we were taking time for the implementation. So they were the people defending us inside the parliament. So these three things, bringing them together, involving them in the process, they were tough things, but luckily we managed to do that.
So,
well, thank you very much. Please, Cecilia, it's now up to you to share the best practices that you have seen and observed during the negotiations. The most.
Yeah, I had one thing before Cecilia starts. I wanted to add. Just land. Sorry, Cecilia, to stop you. The other difficult thing is that, like, in the negotiations, always the toughest negotiator they're negotiating with you, it's the United States. Cecilia is sitting here. She was we would call it internally the Iron Lady, because she would come to you with thousands of just kind of justification to tell you that what you are asking is not the right thing. So the technical work, you need to do that, but Afghanistan is one of the closest allies to United States. So we were always using the political side as well. So, we would go to the Kabul embassy, US embassy in Kabul. We could talk to the economic consul. We could go to the office of the special representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan. Sometimes, we understood that, this thing we are asking for it, technically the USTR will not accept that. But we wanted those things to be done. So we were just kind of doing all those things. Sometimes it was helping, sometimes it was not helping. But, overall thing is that the political lobby decide your technical work. So you have to prove yourself that technically that you're capable of doing this thing and you can justify that. But political support, it's always quite important in the process.
I would say that is very, very, very true. You touched on all aspects of this. First of all, team, the selection of your team. The quality of the people is important, but their durability in the job is also important. It does no good to have someone coming in, working for a few months or a year, and then going away. This process is going to take a lot longer than you think it is. And as a consequence, when you pull your team together, you have to know that they're going to be there, that the institutional memory that they develop in working on the package and on the negotiations doesn't just kind of go away. I can't emphasize enough the importance of a good coordination mechanism standing behind the team. Your goals do not come out of thin air. They come from the interests of your private sector, from the interests of your legislators, from the interests of other actors in your trade world. These people have to be accessible. Their ideas, their needs, their fears have to be accessible to you. So it is terribly important that you have not simply, I know these people, I can talk to them if I have to, but a mechanism by which you meet regularly to take their views, but also to keep them informed of what is going to be a long, difficult, and complex process. The one thing that Mozamil did not mention, but that I would say is absolutely critical, is that you have good Geneva representation during this process. If you don't have someone in Geneva that knows what they're doing, you're going to have a great deal of trouble getting anything done, because you're only going to be in Geneva 3 or 4 times a year for the meetings, probably less. In between those meetings, you have to have a person who knows the process, who is well connected back in capital, who can talk for you. Now, technically, yes, your representative in Geneva, usually a member of the foreign ministry, is a terribly important person in all cases. The problem is it's probably not just your foreign ministry or the political end of it that is conducting this negotiation. You probably have a commerce ministry and an agriculture ministry and a lot of other people back home who have vital interests in the negotiation. So in Geneva, you need a representative who understands these things and who is dedicated, if possible, at least part of his or her portfolio, dedicated to the WTO process. This person can deal with the Secretariat, which is vital, but also with the member states. I think Mozamil's point about using the political side of things to facilitate the negotiations, that is truly important. The United States, at least in my time, was very interested in using the accession process as a kind of interactive method of communicating trade priorities and trade interests with the incipient, the coming members. And it was, that's why we were so active. Other countries may or may not be as active in the process, but your key trading partners, the ones that when you list out your top 50 imports and exports, coalesce into a small group of terribly important places. Their representatives in Geneva and in capital have to be kept informed, and the political aspects of this should not be discounted. Your representatives in capitals should be active in ensuring that your interests are known to the other countries. Best practices for the process: patience, lots of patience. Take questions as a mark of interest, not as an irritation. And I would say, in terms of technical work, be absolutely certain when you go into a negotiating session that you have not just the position you want, but the next position and the next position. Because these things, the minute you hit the table, everything will change. and there's really nothing else that can be said for it. I have one question for you, Mozamil, that I had been wanting to ask. Now that Afghanistan is a participating member in these and not the point of concern, what are you asking countries for? What does a newly formed WTO member, and not that new at this point, what are you asking from countries in the accession process?
Well, it's a good question because, in fact, the Afghani representative in WTO is heading a group of coordinating acceding countries. So you could say a few words about that group, G+7.
You know, that's the good initiative because the accession division, they are working with our mission, and our ambassador, he is quite active because I think we are the only LDC, or maybe one of the few, that we have a fully fledged WTO mission there. We have ambassador plus 3 representatives dedicated from Ministry of Commerce of Afghanistan. That's something that when I was working on negotiation, I envisioned that we have to have a strong team. There are several reasons for that. One thing, that the idea I shared with the accession division, and they work on it, that to work on the trade for peace and peace and development, that is quite important because the countries that they're war affected, you know, they need trade, and that is quite important. Second thing, our ambassador, he is also leading the I think, I don't exactly remember, but it's the Trade Facilitation Committee, he is chairing that. So that was one of our major aim to move ahead, because the transit right, this is something that we suffered a lot from it. Because we are looking forward, even with the overall other members, we will not be that much involved because our trade is not that much, but especially with our neighboring countries that they're looking forward for it, Uzbekistan, Iran, if political problem is solved, and Turkmenistan. So our major thing will be the transit-related issues and the landlocked countries' agendas. We will be always part of that. You know, the investment-related things, that is quite important. But overall, when we talk about trade for development, that will be our main idea or our main agenda for whatever negotiation we are entering to it. Because these are the things that matter us a lot.
Well, thank you very much for this reply, Mozamil. Do you have another question, Cecilia?
I guess for Mozamil, or perhaps for you, or for Carl. I would ask one of you to discuss what you think when you were working on your accession, how you approached the members that were negotiating with you. Did you see them as adversaries, or did you see them as people trying to help you understand the rules and work towards a framework within which you could satisfy the many requests you were getting?
As far as I'm concerned, I always looked at the people I negotiated with as friends, as people that are open to give me advice and to understand me. And on the other side, I tried to be very frank about the problems we had and the time probably we needed to resolve them, or sometimes their questions and their insistence helped me persuade other departments, other people in Sofia to move ahead. So at least I always looked at them as allies, not as adversaries, but as allies in my goal, which was very important. And in fact, I had several meetings with you. I always have understood what you asked me as something that helped me in the process. And of course, I looked at you as an ally. What about Karel?
Your mic is off, yes.
Well, up to now, we've had, we didn't have many negotiations, but the ones, consultations, but the ones that we have consulted with, we have seen them as, even though we are very small, as equal partners. What they have done in our case is ask questions. And we were very happy to answer these questions. Why? Because the questions actually have been more because of the fact that up till now, they are not very well known with our constitutional arrangements, as it were. And some of these questions were also for us important to answer them. And so we didn't have, up to now, at least I can be very frank about it. Because we are a small country, open economy, we need everybody. We are not in a position to see anybody as adversaries. We just have to comply with the requests and give as transparent as possible the information what members are seeking. So in principle, I mean, many years ago, I was a diplomat at the European Union, and when you have that kind of experience, you know what it is to negotiate with 27 countries. You know what it is to hammer out solutions that are acceptable to everybody. So in terms of negotiations, it is not, you do not have the luxury of thinking adversarial.
Well, thank you, Karel. I'm sorry. Sorry, I thought you finished. I'm sorry, please continue. But we have 3 or 4 questions. If you'd like us to move to the questions, would you agree to do that?
If I add something, maybe Cecilia want to hear from me as well. So if you allow.
Please do.
You know, in our negotiation experience, what I found out, especially, I did mention that I learned a lot from 2 people in the process. One was Cecilia Klein and the second was Shidu. And they were the people that I was having most of the argument. And even sometimes we would go quite tough with each other. You know, because sometimes I was blaming Shidu, that even Meka and the other colleague in the accession, they would be hearing that. And I was saying that why you are defending the members, why you are just acting like you're negotiating with me and all those things. But he would give me at such difficult argument in time, he would give me advices that even in his response, in his toughness, I would seek a kind of, you know, a place to go to it and learn from it. The same was with, because the 2 countries that they negotiated with us till the end, it was US and the EU. EU, we managed to do it through the political and diplomatic channel as well. With the US, because they were focusing mostly on rules side, and sometimes we would consider it, why they are doing that? Why they are not accepting our justification? Why? Whether they're ignoring this thing, and it would develop a kind of, you know, the kind of hard feeling that, you know, look at that. But in the same process, we would learn things from them, and just to show us that how we are moving on that. So actually, even in the argument, in the tough negotiations, and also in the face-to-face kind of, you know, confrontation on certain issues, we would find way to address that problem. So at the end of the day, you are negotiating for your best interest of your country, and the other part, you know, they're negotiating for their best interest of their country. So you have to find the way. So I think the more you interact, the more you argue, the more you debate something, I think the better you will get the result in the process.
Well, thank you, Mosamil. Now let's look at the questions. First of all, there is Yi Lin. I hope that I say that correctly. He is writing, "Hi Atanas, how to take your counterpart who is so aggressive during negotiations as a friend?" I think that we have to make a very big difference between the interests of the countries that we represent as negotiators and the partners, and the relationship that you establish with the person on the other side. As Mozabil was saying, this is a relationship based on trust, on human dignity, on human understanding, and always in such a relationship, good relations may be created, and friendly relations and mutual support may be created without in any way trespassing the interests of the countries that you represent. Because people, though having different positions, may help each other in the process, and that is quite normal when they establish good working relationships. And I don't see any contradiction between the different interests of the country and the friendship in the relationship. There is a question from Jeremy Haile, two questions. In fact, how I could preserve the no-go area, and to Mozamil about the trading rights issue, which became an issue after the first 3 or 4 negotiations to the WTO. How, first of all, how I defended my interest. It was, of course, based on proving that what we were doing is compatible with the GATT rules, and saying that the legislation we developed is compatible with these rules. So on that basis, we could be really persuasive. As far as the trading rights are concerned, in fact, there are two questions, one to Mozamil and one to Cecilia, because this was an issue that started to develop after the first years of the WTO accessions. Who would like to start?
Cecilia should answer, then I will go.
I defer to Mozamil.
You know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm talking because I'm talking from my experience. You know, especially like Cecilia, she has been in the process for quite long. She will explain from her experience. But what I think, my thinking, maybe I'm not right on that. But that's what I think. If there is no, you know, straightforward kind of article in, you know, what we said in the Bibles of the WTO, you know, go for it and defend it if it is in the interest of your country. You will see many people that they will be opposing that you can go and you can justify, you know, those things for them. You should link it to your internal processes and your whatever your inside your country. So if there is no straightforward rules in the WTO books for it, you can go, because ultimately the main decision makers are the member country. If they're okay with you, you know, they're okay. If they're not, you know, find the way between the process, because we face several areas, you know, in our discussion. Maybe we haven't managed to achieve whatever we wanted to get, but somehow, if not the same thing, we came down. So if there is my general, you know, perception about it, if there is nothing which WTO prohibit or restricted, go and, you know, talk and discuss with the member countries. Like in the no-go area, for example, in our constitution, we say certain items are prohibited to import. So we, in the process, put it there to the member. They said, our constitution, it says that these are prohibited. We cannot change it. We cannot negotiate it. We are not working on it. So straightforward. And member, they understand those things. You know, they understand the logic. So be logical, be straightforward, be honest, to present your case and then discuss it with the member countries. Would like to hear from Cecilia, because I'm talking from my experience. Now, technically, she can explain it in a better way.
Well,
Please, Cecilia.
as a member, as a representative of a member, when you're in an accession negotiation, you have a list of priorities. And I do remember the trading rights issue dealing with Afghanistan. Trading rights is a concept that is sometimes hard to understand, but it's the basis of everything we do in the WTO. Trading rights is the ability of people on the ground to import and to export. And if there are barriers to that, it really won't matter what the tariffs are. It won't matter what's on a piece of paper. If the people on the ground have to go through 45 different steps to get a license to trade, if I remember properly, there's no point to it. So while trading rights is not found explicitly in either the GATT or the WTO, it is in essence the basis on which you are trying to construct a framework for the new country's relationship with the sitting membership of the WTO. Red lines. Red lines are terribly important. But I would advise that you, if you see a red line looming as being on someone's list of things that need to be addressed, for example, trading rights, it would behoove the applicant to begin working with the coordination mechanism inside the country to explore how an accommodation might be made on this. I would say that red lines, such as some of those that Mozamil mentioned, are very well understood by most of the members. Sometimes these are cultural, sometimes they're political. The countries that are negotiating with you they're going to have to make up their own minds as to what constitutes for them a key part of the negotiation, when in fact it may be a red line for the applicant country. And the only way that this can be dealt with is through negotiation and discussion. So I would again support Mozamil's point. It is terribly important, the relationship between the negotiators as distinct from the relationship between the countries of the negotiators. It is very important for the negotiator, for the applicant country, to be aware of the people, of the personalities, and of the position of the people with whom he or she is dealing. The most important thing on trading rights, I would say, is if there is a barrier to the ability of a member of your community, of the applicant's community, if there are barriers for them to actually engage in trade, then those need to be examined in light of WTO rules. You may not come to it early in the negotiation, but sooner or later, this is the rock upon which many an accession boat has foundered.
Well, thank you, Cecilia. And we have a question to Karel. How does the European Union and the Kingdom of Netherlands react to your accession process? Do they put some restrictions to what you could do? Do they have some specific requests for you when you are negotiating or you will be negotiating? There is such a question. Please, Karel.
No, not at all, Atanas. The only thing is when, of course, we started the process, we needed to do the necessary consultations with the Netherlands because we are part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and the kingdom consists of 4 countries: Curaçao, Aruba, Sint Maarten, and Curaçao, Aruba, Sint Maarten, and the Netherlands. But we are a separate customs territory for all intents and purposes, and legally we are not connected to the European Union. Through our constitutional relationship with the Netherlands, which is the part of the kingdom in Europe, we are associated with the European Union, for which there is an association agreement, an OCT decision, but it's a unilateral preferential agreement or preferential arrangement. But legally, we don't impose anything on us because we are not part of the EU customs territory. As the Netherlands is part of the European Union, they are affected by the European Union policies, but not the separate customs territories, Aruba, Curaçao, and Sint Maarten that I mentioned. The only thing is, of course, for instance, if some country in the world will do, let's call them ordinarily bad things, and the European Union decides to have like a measure against an embargo or something against this country, and we would like to initiate discussions for a bilateral trade agreement, and while the Netherlands, as part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, would say, no, but actually we have a problem with that country, and it is not in the interests of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, not the European Union, to engage with bilateral discussions or whatever, then of course we are part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. We should enter into these discussions, but not that the European Union takes a decision for the EU customs territory that it affects us. It doesn't.
Thank you very much. And there is one more question, this time to Mozamil by Yilin, who asked me before about the friendships and the relationships. He's asking you, Mozamil, how this process affected your career development after Afghanistan's accession, being a chief negotiator, please.
That is the tough question. Maybe it made my job or the position I wanted more luxurious, so other people, they wanted to take those jobs. You know, it's always, especially in the least developed countries, it's always, you know, when we go to the certain career development, it helped me a lot, you know, being as a good negotiator. It gave me a lot of appreciation inside the country. President in the cabinet, they appreciated my work in the cabinet declaration. The parliament, they appreciated my work, and they gave me the highest parliament award for the work and all those things. But, you know, soon after accession, you know, I was out of the government, you know, due to changes and all those things, so was away for a while. And then work with the chief executive at that time, because in the previous government we had that position as a senior advisor. It was ministerial rank. So after the last election, I'm still outside the government. Like in terms of the personal career development, it was good for me. It opened more opportunities for me. But you know, one thing I always regret that I was not able, and I was not, or I can say I was not required to serve in that platform, that I always regret that. And, you know, in the future, if I get any opportunity to be back in the same field, I would really, you know, appreciate that and work for it. But yes, it is a strong, it develops you internally, it develops you as a person, you know, it open opportunities for you. For example, I'm sitting here, you know, among the 4 people from all around the world discussing that. So these are the opportunities that you get. You are asked to talk about your experience, to share your experience, and especially in terms of like in my age area, I still have a lot in front of me. So that's why, you know, it was quite an interesting experience. And I hope that one day I'll be back and be involved in the process again.
Thank you, Mozambique. By the way, after I finished the negotiations, I had a lot of other experiences in my economic and political life, but now I'm back in the WTO, and I'm really happy that those things that to some people look very technical, for me they are very interesting and very useful and very important in order to keep my country's trade free and open, and to keep the environment, the trading environment, open. And really in difficult situations like the present one, the COVID situation, it's true that through information, through restraint, through notifications, countries were able to minimize the necessary, probably, restrictions that they introduced during the COVID crisis. And these restrictions did not affect so much trade as they could have in the past. And I think that the WTO has done a great job in creating a separate web page on COVID, on information about restrictions, on the process they were lifted, introduced, and that has helped everybody understand everybody else's position and has helped really develop a good dialogue in this area, which is an area that affects all of us. So this is one of the examples which show that WTO is useful from a wider perspective, and those who work with it should be happy to work with the WTO. Well, this is my experience. What's your last words, colleagues, so that we will be finishing this session, and what will you like to tell those who listen to us? Let's start with Cecilia, please.
Thank you. I guess the one idea that I would like to share with acceding countries, with applicant countries, is that this process seems very, very tough. It seems sometimes even irrelevant. They ask you questions on things and you're saying, why do they want to know that? Sometimes it must seem that the negotiating members don't appreciate how difficult this is, and how don't appreciate the effort that the applicant country is making. Our purpose in the accession process is to alert you to your future responsibilities as members of the international trading system in this organization. An applicant now feels like, why am I being asked all these terrible questions? But the object is that the applicant becomes a member, becomes a keeper of the rules. You will have responsibilities after your membership to maintain and extend the framework for international trading that the WTO represents. International trade is like superfood. It totally expands the ability of even small countries to have more people to buy and sell from. And I can tell you from the point of view of the United States, the ability to buy and sell with other countries is the whole basis of our history. So for the United States, the GATT and the WTO are simply a multinational extension of a process that we went through when we were building our country. And that's what we hope for you, that you will use trade to build your country and to build a place in the international trading system. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cecilia. I would like to now turn to Karel, because he has a specific, so to say, message from his government. They are following him and thanking him for this participation. But what will be your words, Karel?
Well, I think in a, very privileged position to be able to learn from all of you who have already gone through the process, and Cecilia, that is, I've been actively engaged in many accessions. And I think as an observer, a new observer, trying to get into this big club that is so important, we with a very young team, we really need to place our priorities in the right direction. And as I said in the beginning, what we are looking at this moment: organization, capacity building, well preparation. And I learned something today which is very precious, which Cecilia said, as your goals do not come out of thin air. And that is exactly right, because most of the time you are not pursuing your own agenda. You are pursuing an agenda of the country. And the country has different actors, different players, and you need to be sensitive to what they are saying. And as Mozamil indicated, you need to prepare a platform where you engage and interact with several actors, with the government, with the private sector, with parliament. And as he said, even bringing them to Geneva for them to know the environment, but also having somebody in Geneva that connects to the members for you to be able to extract the information. And we are certainly, because of our size and because we have already significant experience within groups of countries forming one unity, diversity in unity, as we are 4 countries in one kingdom. So we are accustomed to having multilateral, small multilateral and bilateral discussions within a group with diverse interests. So to make a long story short, the first thing that I take away from this is keep preparing, keep building up the team, keep assuming the responsibilities, and keep looking around at what is coming towards you and why people are asking certain things, and have patience. Because patience.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karel. I think your last words. What happened?
You're still there.
You're there.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Yeah, what happened? I don't know. With the connection. Oh, now I'm still there. I was just saying that what you have said, just Karel, is that is a very good advice to all those who listened to us and participated in this meeting. They were more than 60, and most of them are people that are participating in negotiations of their countries. And I think that the experience of Mozambique, the experience of Cario, and I hope my experience of my country, and the words of Cecilia to those that are negotiating were very useful for those who will continue this work and who will make the accession process successful even in these difficult times in the WTO. I'm happy to tell you that now that meetings in the WTO resume, there are already meetings related to accessions, and this process will start from the beginning of July again. And this is really something very encouraging, both for the WTO and for the acceding countries, which show that the value of the WTO, even in the difficult times, increases and not on the contrary. Well, I suppose that we could finish this session at this point in time. And of course, I would like to ask you whether you would like to say something more or how we proceed further on. I would like to thank all of you. And of course, I see that Mozambique would like to say something. Am I right?
Yes.
Please do.
Just to sum it up, you know, for those countries that they're exceeding right now, your preparation is important, internal preparation, selection of the chair of the working party, because that person is so important. He plays an important role that he should be there. Third thing, use the accession process for your internal reform and making your system work. Fourth thing, that especially in legal document, what we did in our experience, that we would share the draft with the WTO members so they can look at it. There are two reasons for that. Increasing their confidence in us. Second, enriching that document, because that document will function as a base for our work. And the fourth thing, the post-accession work after negotiation, use that accession in your economic development. That is quite important for your country. For the WTO members, you know, especially in negotiations with LDCs, they should be flexible. They should follow the guidelines. Be tough on the rules side, but on market access, because market access is not only for the economic development, it's also for the socially related activity. That is quite important. For the acceding members, this is quite important. You know, whatever you think is best for your country and you can defend it in front of the member, go for it. So that with this, I can conclude my, you know, thoughts.
Well, thank you to you, and thank you to all the participants, to Cecilia, to Cario as well. I think that this session that we had gave a lot of insights to those who listen to us. And the major thing probably is that all we said, that the accession process is a process not for itself, but it is a process which is crucial for the development of the country, for its future, for its economic competitiveness, and for the welfare of its people, based on a trade policy open and making your country strong in the world. But I think there will be also a message from Michael Shikawa, whom you mentioned. She thanks me, Mozambique, Cario and Cecilia, and all the attendees for a fantastic roundtable discussion. Well, this is a very good recognition from the Accession Division of the WTO. Thank you, Micah. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to those who listened to our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.